How's your day?
So far, so good. How about you?
Good. Oh, and that
Good.
I'm not sure you're using that. That little thing just kind of follows me wherever I go.
Oh yeah,
So you can hide the video on
um,
that or kick it out either way.
let's
Yeah,
see about
you
either
hide the
kicking them
video.
out or hiding. Let's see here. Um,
I always just click.
turn the turn the
If you haven't
stop.
used that before, it's kind of neat. It
No, I
automatically,
like Fathom. I
yeah,
do. The only reason that I've gone back and forth on it is it sometimes seems to have a mind of its own.
yeah,
Like I've seen people try to get rid of it, and then it'll come back 5 times
mhm,
over and does a lot of weird shit.
yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway, um, I went back and I re-listened to the episode on Michael's podcast,
right,
and you had made reference to your Karate Kid promotion,
yeah.
and I had already I had already made this reference that you're going to hear when I read you the intro that I'm gonna share. So, what I thought we could do is um, oh, hold on one moment. My notes were not complete. Hello. All right. So, what I thought we could do is call the episode "Why Marketing is a Martial Art" and do some martial art theme. So,
Okay.
hello and welcome to the Story Power Marketing Show.
Mhm.
Today's episode is called "Why Marketing is a Martial Art." My guest today is Stephen Oliver. Stephen is a ninth degree black belt who is a marketing Mr. Miyagi. If you don't if you don't know that reference, sit tight. We'll explain in a moment. Stephen worked his way through Georgetown. Then I just read what you sent over for your bio, and what I can what I can do is after welcoming you and you saying whatever back, I can say so. There was this movie back in 1984 called The Karate Kid, and the martial arts mentor in The Karate Kid was Mr. Miyagi. You have, Stephen, a great story about marketing your own business related to the Karate Kid. I'd love you to share that story,
Sure.
which is loaded with marketing lessons. So
Perfect.
that
Yeah.
I think could be a great way to kick into this thing. Um, then
And I've
you
got a
know,
good couple snarky stories on the Miyagi reference, so that'll be fun.
okay, sounds good. And um, so I know that you kind of work martial arts into what you do with the financial planners and stuff. So I don't want to step on your toes, but I just made some notes about a few different places where the martial arts reference in my mind is
Mhm.
is applicable. Number one, uh, dive deep with masters. That's something you
Mhm.
do.
Sure.
You,
Yeah.
you talk about Kennedy, both Kennedys, Johnny and Dan.
Right. Right.
You talk about um, Jay Abraham and
Mhm.
all of your mentors and the best martial artists
You
dive
bet.
deep with masters. You study your competitors. You learn from
Mhm.
what they're doing well. You pounce on their mistakes
Yeah.
and their weaknesses. Uh, you get a coach.
You bet.
Having a coach is a critical part of martial arts and marketing success. Pursuing continuous
Mhm.
improvement. I
Yeah.
mean, you just tell your story, and that's
You
a
bet.
constant theme in your story.
You bet.
And then the notion, I loved all the conversation you had with with Michael, and would love to dive in the same direction on understanding your target market, message to market match, and all
Mhm.
of that. And when I start talking about that stuff, I will often reference Dan Kennedy's notion of marketing being a three-legged stool:
You bet.
um, market, message, media.
You
And if
bet.
any of the three are not in balance, the stool wobbles, the marketing falls. And the notion of keep everything in balance is central to martial arts, central to marketing. So
You
we'll
bet.
play with all of that
Yeah.
and um, talk for a half hour or so,
Sure.
and call it a day. So let
Half a
me.
half hour goes damn quickly when you're doing these things.
It does. If we roll a little bit past, no problem. I've done 45 minutes on these things,
Okay.
so as long as you have the time, I
Yeah.
think we're mapped until top of the hour.
Yeah, I'm good till then.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna start the record. Hello and welcome to the Story Power Marketing Show. Today's episode is called Why Marketing is a Martial Art. My guest today is Stephen Oliver. Stephen is a ninth degree black belt who is a marketing Mr. Miyagi. If you don't know that reference, sit tight. We'll explain in a moment. Stephen worked his way through Georgetown University, teaching karate and expecting to go on to get an MBA at Harvard or Wharton and then on to Wall Street. Instead, upon graduating, he moved to Denver and opened 6 martial arts schools within 30 months. And he grew it all to 3,500 students, developing a multi-million-dollar business. He ended up promoting one of the top tournaments in the world and grew his coaching martial arts schools internationally, and now also financial advisors on I stumbled over that. Grew coaching, grew into coaching martial arts schools internationally, and now he also coaches financial advisors on marketing, sales management, and teaching. All right. It's short enough that I'll just do a do-over if you don't mind.
There you go. No problem.
Yep. All right. Let me stop this record. It's easier for my VA to start from
Yeah,
scratch.
I always find it easier to turn it off, turn it back on, and know where you started.
Exactly. Yeah. I know, you and I shouldn't be diving into the technical weeds and worrying about this stuff, but do you
Yeah.
know about a software called Descript?
I was just making a note of that one. I haven't used it yet. I've
It's
used
awesome.
video.
Yeah.
Uh,
So we use video. We use video and Descript. Video is really good at carving up a long podcast into excerpts.
yeah.
Um, what what Descript does is you upload the video and it instantly generates the transcript. And then at the push of a button, you can delete the filler words.
Hmm.
You can also apply what they call studio sound. So sound processing, even on a bad mic, gets instantly great, volumes equalized. But what's really cool about it is that any edits that you make
Hmm.
in the um, written transcript, the video adjusts.
Oh, it edits
So
the video to the written. Wow.
yeah, so in this case, if I didn't stop this thing and
Yeah.
we just started over, I could just delete out the chunk that we flubbed, start at the point where I stumbled, and it would meld the stuff together seamlessly.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. So
This stuff is taking things that, yeah, it reminds you. First time I did a 30-second spot for a TV channel
yeah,
is we spent a whole day sitting in the editing suite editing it.
I know.
And the second time I did it, they were up on, or whatever version after that, they were up on the digital editing,
Yeah,
and we spent about an hour editing rather than 8 hours editing.
yeah,
Now you're down to 10 minutes editing rather than hours.
yeah. I was the editor of my high school newspaper, and so I know what cut and paste literally means.
Oh yeah.
I used to paste up the newspaper. So anyway, All right, back to it. Sorry about the stumble.
Very good.
Hello and welcome to the Story Power Marketing Show. Today's episode is called Why Marketing is a Martial Art. My guest today is Stephen Oliver. Stephen is a 9th degree black belt who is a marketing Mr. Miyagi. If you don't know that reference, sit tight. We'll explain in a moment. Stephen worked his way through Georgetown University teaching karate. He expected to go on to get an MBA at Harvard or Wharton, then on to Wall Street. Instead, upon graduating, he moved to Denver and opened 6 martial arts schools within 30 months. He grew it to 3,500 students and developed a multi-million-dollar business. He ended up promoting one of the top tournaments in the world, and he grew into coaching martial arts schools internationally. Now he also coaches financial advisors on marketing, sales, management, and teaching. He's written 8 books on marketing, management, and personal growth, most aimed at martial arts school operators or financial advisors for practice management and growth. He's been a speaker at organizations ranging from elementary schools to international industry events. He shared the stage at his own events and those of others with Lee Miltier, Dan Kennedy, Brian Tracy, professional athletes Chuck Norris, Jay Abraham, Wayne Dyer, and Tony Robbins. Stephen Oliver, welcome to the Story Power Marketing Show.
Hey, great to be here, Tom. I'm so looking forward to this.
Yeah, really happy to have you here. And I made that reference to this guy named Mr. Miyagi. You and I are very much old enough to remember. I think it was 1984 when a movie called Karate Kid came out. There was this kid, Ralph Macchio played the kid. Mr. Miyagi was his martial arts mentor.
Yeah.
And you have a great story that I've heard you tell about marketing your karate schools in conjunction with the movies. Some great lessons from that one. Tell us about the movie.
Yeah, a couple of things on that, and you know, I want to go back to the Miyagi thing for a second. But when I was working my way through Georgetown, I was working for an organization called the Junri Institute, and world famous Taekwondo instructor, known as the father of Taekwondo. But he was good friends with Muhammad Ali, Bruce Lee, among others, who were also his students. And he was the official instructor for Congress, taught everybody from George H.W. Bush to Joe Biden and Newt Gingrich, you know, a huge number of politicians there in D.C. But I had heard stories about the release of Enter the Dragon. That's even an older reference.
Yeah.
You know, the movie that in essence made Bruce Lee international star, that was released sadly after he died. And I had heard about their promotions, and when Karate Kid came out, and you're old enough to remember, I am, but it was a sleeper. It was one of those things. It wasn't, you know, here's the next Star Wars movie, here's the next blockbuster. It was kind of this little, kind of poorly funded, under the radar movie. And I managed to go see an early preview screening and went, wow, the message in this is perfect for us. And there's the great scene of, you know, Miyagi's talking to Daniel. You know, Daniel, why do we learn karate? Do we learn karate to fight? No, we learn karate so we don't have to fight. All this great philosophical message. So by the time the movie was full bore on the weekends and offline, you had mentioned cutting and pasting and newspapers and so forth. This was in the era that I had to go take an X-Acto knife and a board, cut out the pictures to paste, you know, with tape. And then I took the pictures down to a silk screening shop and had them blow up poster size silk screen boards for posters in the movie theater. And then we went over and mimeographed flyers to hand out in the theaters. And the Karate Kid series probably made me an extra $3-4 million in revenue. Easily 2 or 3 million, easily 2 or 3,000 students from the in the movie promotions that we did, as well as the other things we ramped up on. But funny backstory with Miyagi. Chuck Norris is a friend of mine. You mentioned I'd spoken to him, but I was at his ranch one time, and he had just come off. He did a movie called Sidekicks, which, you know, to be charitable, was kind of Chuck Norris does Karate Kid. And he visited our schools when he was promoting Sidekicks. We took him around the theaters and he came to the schools, and we had literally thousands of people trying to get his autograph. But I sat down with Chuck and in a very friendly way. I said, Chuck, let me remind you, you ran, a big chain of commercial schools. That's how you got into this. The way he got into acting, by the way, he was trained with Bruce Lee, and he was training Steve McQueen. And Steve McQueen suggested he go into acting. And the first big movie he was in was in one of Bruce Lee's movies. They had a big fight scene. But I said to him, I said, so why is it Karate Kid in your movie, it's the drunk, it's the drunk cook or gardener who's the hero of the show, and the commercial school operator or the professional is the bad guy, right? And Karate Kid, Kreese was the bad guy, No Mercy, Sir, all that crap, Cobra Kai. But the bad guy was the commercial guy, and the good guy was the drunk gardener. Or in Chuck's movie, it was the drunk, kitchen help. So I fairly heavily lambasted him for maintaining that stereotype. Regardless of that, it made me millions, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, and there's an awesome business lesson in it. There are a lot of awesome business lessons in that story, but one of the most basic is you went to where you knew your target audience would be.
You bet.
And that is such a key principle that so many business people really miss. They just, pick a platform because it's the platform du jour, and they start dishing out whatever, and they're not thinking about who is my target market, where can I go find them. So talk to us a little bit about that, how you've applied that to marketing in general, and really how you came to the idea of setting up shop in those movie theaters.
Yeah, I call it a lot with our clients, fishing the right pond, right? Is if you're going to be premium priced, you don't want to bring in a bunch of broke people. If you're targeting, like in the advisors, if you're targeting 50 to 60-year-olds coming up on retirement, or in the martial arts field, mostly it was targeting mom of a 7-year-old. And what on that target audience, see, people get that so wrong all the time, and there's major big corporate stories about that. You remember when the Detroit, auto business was just stumbling, and an interesting thing they discovered, which picture who was running the marketing for Cadillac or for Chevy and all that stuff. It was some guy who was 70 years old in Detroit, only driving around Detroit. He never saw a BMW or a Toyota or anything in Detroit because, you either are a car manufacturer or a supplier, so you were afraid to. And the marketing, they finally figured out that as much as 80% of the buying decision was being made by a woman, not by a male. And in the martial arts industry, it's very similar. Typical who run the martial arts schools tend to be athletes. They tend to be male. They tend to have a fairly macho culture about them. They're big, nowadays UFC fans, one thing or another. So they're emulating and modeling all that. And then when they go in the kids market, they forget that mom's the decision maker. Dad holds veto power, but mom's going to be the one that responds to the ads. Mom's going to be evaluating for 7-year-old son or 7-year-old daughter. Mom is going to be, mostly in charge of the decision. So you mostly have men who are into the violence designing ads that would target other people like them, that they're hoping is going to attract the mom of a 7-year-old who's concerned about how the child is doing in school, concerned about how the child is dealing with peer pressure, dealing with online media, one thing or another. And there's a complete mismatch in the frame of reference they're using, the graphics and the in the ads. If you look at even nowadays in Facebook, the photos they select versus what would work are completely different. The language that they use are completely different. If you go look at their websites, they're even worse, because at least something like Facebook will A/B split test and tell them, their stuff isn't working when it's not working. So that's a starting point, is just that, figure out what your audience is, who it is. Luckily I figured it out pretty quickly that, I wasn't so much advertising to Dad. I was involving Dad because he could veto, but I was for the kids market. I was advertising to Mom. I started developing everything as if I was talking to mom about her 7-year-old daughter,
Yeah.
even though we had about 50-50 male-female ratio. But it was everything that she wanted to hear, not maybe what dad would want his son to be, learning how to be rough and tough, but what mom wanted developmentally for their child.
Yeah. And how did you figure it out? You said, luckily I figured it out. It wasn't luck, Stephen.
Yeah. Well, you talked about mentorship and martial arts, and one thing or other as we were talking offline is, when I was in DC working for this big multi-million-dollar organization, I put together the business plan, and I had everybody's help. The general manager, the owner of the organization, and so forth. Their full support, all the way to they let me go through the file cabinets, and look at what they were spending. But the one thing in learning how to do the sales, the teaching, the operations, is I figured out I didn't know anything about the marketing. And they were advertising full page ads in the Washington Post. They were on TV. They
Hmm.
were on the Kung Fu TV show, if you remember that from back then. Junior was a marketing genius. He had a gift for PR, including bringing Muhammad Ali in and getting great press, and
Right.
one thing or another. Um, and so I figured out pretty quickly that I didn't understand how they were driving traffic.
Right.
So I went, and this is pre-Google. I went to the Library of Congress and ended up studying great, traditional direct response marketing books. The first ad campaign I did for my schools included a focused, targeted, sequential direct mail campaign, mail merge targeted. That was going to include follow-up telephone, outbound telemarketing. We figured out pretty quickly how hard it is to telemarket 5,000 cold names, so that didn't go very far.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was all the way back then. It was studying, direct response marketing. Back then, SCORE and the SBA provide lots of courses. Some of them were excellent. Some of them were horrible. I found a
Hmm.
lot of their teachers were like the marketing director for Safeway, and so if you're
Right.
getting ready to open a small business, their perspective, was completely off base. But
Yeah.
I basically did everything I could in the pre-internet age to get my hands on any and everything related to how to market and fill up the school. And then when I moved to Denver, I ended up doing 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months, and grew to about 3,500 active students in the first 3 years. So obviously it paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is so much parallel between what you're describing and what makes someone a black belt. What
Oh yeah,
what
yeah,
what is required to master martial arts? And you're talking about going and studying the masters. We've studied many of the same: Dan
you bet.
Kennedy, Jay Abraham. The list goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah,
And so, studying the masters, understanding what works, looking at what doesn't work. That's really a key in martial arts. It's a key in marketing. And back to Dan Kennedy, when you were talking about going after the moms and
mhm,
changing the message from the macho, violent, kick somebody's ass routine
yeah,
to build your kids' self-esteem and all of the elements that speak to the parents. What you're really talking about is something that Dan Kennedy calls message to market match.
you bet.
And that takes you to another really key principle of marketing and key principle of martial arts, which is balance.
Hmm.
Kennedy talks about marketing being a three-legged stool:
You
the
bet.
message, the market, and then the media. And if you don't get those three properly in balance, well, the stool is going to wobble, fall down. If you're not in balance in whatever martial art you're pursuing, same thing, you're going to fall to that mat pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about all of the different media that you also have chosen to use, and how that principle that I know you believe in, of the marketing being a three-legged stool, has instructed the work that you've done over the years.
Yeah, well, there probably isn't a media that I haven't used
Yeah.
in a geographically targeted way with with growing the martial arts schools, and now working with financial advisors. And when I opened the locations, I was terribly underfinanced. I had my parents loaned me $10,000, and I had a pocket full of credit cards. In fact, when I did my MBA later, I remember the finance professor was talking about the amount of financing that a company needs to grow, and I gave him the example of what I had actually done, and he said that's impossible. I said no, it's just very stressful. But it started out with figuring out how to do aggressive grassroots marketing that didn't cost money.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of small businesses miss the point that if you're going to grow quickly, but you don't have, $1 million in the bank, half a million, whatever it might be, you got to figure out what aggressive grassroots marketing is going to work. And
Yeah.
and I basically had the principle was I'm going to do everything I can do that's free or cheap, and then with the money comes in, I'm going to keep running, ramping it up to things that are perhaps more productive but more expensive. And what I talk with my clients, and a lot of them are fairly small, is I think of it as a graph. You have things that
Hmm.
are labor intensive and high cost, which we try to avoid, things that are labor intensive and low cost, things that are low labor but high cost, and things that, are maybe a mixture of those things. And most paid media, TV, infomercials, radio, tend to be in that you create the spot and then there's very little labor involved after that, but there's a lot of media buy, right?
Hmm.
Where a lot of what we were doing early on with the schools was very grassroots. So it was getting out directly into elementary schools and running what we called PE teacher for the day. A direct response principle you'll appreciate is what everybody else would do if they did something like that is they go do a demo. Well, we
Hmm.
didn't do a demo, we did a class because we wanted it to be a participation. The
Hmm.
other thing that they'll do is they'll maybe pass out flyers or something like that. Well, we passed out permission slips. So we sent home permission slips, which is what? A lead page, right?
Hmm.
Same as a lead page online now. We'd send a permission slip home ahead of time. We'd get 85% more or less. So 500 kids, we'd get, let's say 40 or 400, 450 leads back. We get the permission slips filled out. So name, address, phone number, later email address, mobile number. And then we'd go in and we'd teach a class for the kids. And then
Hmm.
we would have a way of contacting the parents. So one of the things that, the lesson from that is all marketing now, the internet gurus teach, you have a landing page and you collect information and then you follow up on that. And most people do a bad job on following up.
Right.
But still, most people in the kind of grassroots marketing that I do for the martial arts schools, they end up just getting exposures, but they never end up capturing a lead, and they never
Right.
follow up proactively. And the thing that made it go from maybe I got one or two enrollments to I got 400 leads and 40 enrollments
Hmm.
was that ability to proactively follow up on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And there you're talking about
yeah,
direct, they call it direct response marketing
hmm,
for a reason. It's about putting yourself in front of an audience, making that connection, collecting the information that you
yeah,
need to respond, and then following up quickly and effectively. There's the old, I think it's a Gary Halbert quote. I've heard Kennedy say it. Um, how are you going to market your hamburger stand?
right,
Well,
right.
go find a horde of hungry people
Starving
and
crowd, yeah,
yeah, starving crowd, and uh, you're demonstrating that.
yeah.
But that story, the Halbert and Kennedy quote, doesn't. It ends without that really critical piece that you just shared. It's one thing to show up in front of the starving crowd. It's another thing to follow up with the starving crowd so they get a hamburger today, tomorrow, the next day, and you become the favorite hamburger joint.
No, exactly. And it's such a big difference is, so many times we're just happy to get exposure, right?
Right.
We pass out flyers or we, in today's day and age, we get a YouTube view or whatever it might be. Well, if it doesn't lead to them raising their hand in some way
Yep.
and giving you follow-up information and then something where you can eventually convert them to whatever your sales process is for the advisors and for the martial arts schools, it's always convert them to an appointment
Yep.
and then convert them into a client. And with the advisor side, there might be a qualification process in between, to make sure, you're not dealing with broke people when you're looking for people who have a 2 million in investable assets per se.
Yep.
But same thing. I mean, you've got to some way, shape, or form get them to raise their hand, and then spend 90% of your effort on people who raise their hands,
Right.
and 10% of your effort on trying to get people to raise their hand.
Yeah, and I've been a marketing consultant, as you have, for many, many decades. And what would you estimate? 80% of the people who come to you, maybe 90% come saying, leads, 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 give me new leads. I need leads. I need leads. And they are not doing what you talked about, spending 90% of their time milking the cows that are already in the barn. You have so much opportunity with people who have already raised their hand,
Oh yeah.
from existing clients who you can turn into champions and referral partners and upsell and cross sell, to those who haven't yet bought but are following you and paying attention to you wherever you're communicating with them. And so that idea, number one, get those leads to raise their hand. Exposure alone's not worth it. Number two, once they raise their hand, spend 90% of your time focusing on them. That alone's worth the price of admission for those of you
Yeah.
who are listening and watching.
Yeah, and you can whittle it down a little bit even more. Is, in today's online marketing world,
Yep.
what we're finding is, if I initiate getting them on the phone
Mm-hmm.
in 30 seconds,
Yep.
I have a massively better conversion ratio than if it's just 2 or 3 hours later,
Yep.
right? And so you kind of end up with two things that sound contradictory, but they're not. Is the immediate response to them and immediately getting them on the phone
Mm-hmm.
creates 300%, 400%, 500% better conversion rate.
Yeah.
On the other side, what most people do is they try real hard for a week, or they try really hard for a couple of weeks, or maybe they get real sophisticated and do 29-day sequential autoresponder, and then they give up on people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a meeting. There's probably 50 of them were all my clients, and they're paying 3,000-4,000 a month each to be part of this group. And I asked them a simple question. I said, you guys aren't following up with your leads, long enough, strong enough, and so forth. But let me ask you a question. How long did you follow me before you decided to jump on board?
Yep.
One of them said 9 years. One of them said 7 years. One of them said 4 years. Another said 3 years. And of course, there were a few that saw something and jumped right away. I just did a new promotion, and we got 19 people to respond, and of those, I would argue 4 or 5 are new, and 15 are probably equal, halfway between they used to be a client and faded out, and now this got them to raise their hand again, or they had been on one of the lists and have been following forever, and finally it clicked their button and they decided to respond. And so you look at those kind of ratios. That's why, you follow, and I'm not talking about just by email, but you follow up forever. I mean, we'll follow up forever by email, by text, by voiceless voicemail, by direct mail. Periodically, we'll put a live person on, going back to the list and calling. That's what we were doing last month, is taking our 500 hottest prospects and our 100 or 200 former clients, and had 2 different people, burning up the phone lines trying to get hold of them.
Yeah, such valuable advice. And you and I both know and have done work with Dave D, who's a fabulous marketer,
You bet.
and really knows his stuff when it comes to lead gen through webinars. And really, it's less about lead gen and more about engaging existing prospects with webinars. And one of the things that I remember him saying is, hey, don't get the idea that you're going to throw a webinar, especially with cold leads, and that the next day they're going to call you up and sign a contract.
Right.
He said, I follow up, and I think on average, he said, it's 9 months of persistent follow up and communication and engaging in a entertaining way until, at some point, so many months out, they show up as a client. And he has stories also about years later, people come out of the woodwork and drop $10,000 on some program that he's pitching.
And a lot of people who aren't in the world that we're in, they freak out and they say, well, how many times am I going to have to talk to each individual? Well, a lot of this is one to many, right? It just feels to them like it's one to one, or it feels to them like it's personalized. So I just mailed 500 fake handwritten note cards. So, it's literally the thing the politicians used to use. It's a handwritten note. It's to former clients and hot prospects. It feels personal to them. From my standpoint, we wrote the text once, put it together, and it goes out in bulk. Same thing with a daily or 3 or 4 time a week email. You're
Right.
showing up, you become friendly, you become familiar to them. And again, the mistake, this is what Dave is a genius at. I'm still working on the self-discipline to be, I'm very good at it. I haven't been as disciplined as I should at, but to just create the daily engaging email.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just life story and discussion about what went through your day. Somebody you probably know, Matt Fury, who did this really well. I remember I used to read Matt's, and he was famous for twice a day emails. And for the people who don't know him, he sold programs on wrestling and fitness, and he owns Psycho Cybernetics now, so he sold different courses in the book and so forth. But sometimes his email would be, "Oh my God, I got out of bed this morning. I smacked my big toe on the bed and I stumbled, and there was this coursing of curse words coming out of my mouth, and then I reframed myself and realized what I needed to accomplish." And it would be just like stuff like that.
Yeah.
The old Gary Halbert newsletter,
Yeah.
you know, the Gary Halbert newsletter, and this is a paid subscription once a month. You'd open it up and you never know what you're going to find.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd
Exactly.
find this tremendous, lesson on direct mail. I remember one time I get it, and there's a picture of this girl from Costa Rica in a bikini, and the entire newsletter was about this new girlfriend he met in Costa Rica and
Uh-huh.
why Costa Rica is a great place to go meet girls. And,
Yeah.
one of his most famous ads was a personals ad he wrote for himself, by the way. But it's all
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
it's all that kind of out of the box, engaging, personal. And
Right.
if I go to what the martial arts guys do poorly is they tend to be egocentric and it's all about their bio. But
Right.
what the advisors do poorly is it's all about the return in the market, and it's never about them, right? And it's
Totally.
not personal, it's not engaging. They're all trying to look alike, be alike, they're all vanilla. And it's the ones that stand out. They have something interesting about their hobbies, their background, their interests, their focus. Maybe they dress in a quirky way, or they have a classic car, or they're into motorcycles or something. They're the ones that stand out. They're not the
Yeah.
ones that everybody else is trying to have a contest to be the same. It really needs to be something that feels personal, that gives you personality, and then is touching those people on a regular basis.
Yeah, because especially for the professional service
Yeah.
providers who believe that they have valuable information to share, the tendency is to just dish out in this very professional and serious tone. Here is the important information that you need to know today about the trends in the market or the Roth IRA rules or blah 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 blah. And what they don't realize
Yeah.
is that even if they think they have some special sauce to whatever it is they may know about Roth IRAs in the market,
Yeah.
information's a commodity. Information is not enough. And to your point, you have to instill some personality into it. You have to make it entertaining. And all those people you mentioned, Matt Fury, Dan Kennedy in his emails, Ben Settle, Gary Halbert, Dave D. I like to think this is what I do. It's what I teach. Daily emails with a lot of personality and a lot of entertainment. And oh, by the way, there's always rolled into it some kind of meaningful information and some kind of call to action. This
Yeah.
notion that over here are the valuable, entertaining, fun emails, and over here are the ones where we sell. Get rid of that idea. I know you understand this and you practice this. There's always a call to action. You're
Yeah.
always selling, but what you're doing is delivering valuable information in an entertaining way as a lead in to say, oh, by the way, sign up for my thing, download this, go to my event, buy my product, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and the other word you could throw in there is authenticity.
Yeah,
you know, and
bingo.
and
Right.
and in the age of social media, of filters, and every get rich guru is standing in front of the Lamborghini, and in front of the rented private jet, and with the photo of the Miami penthouse on the green screen in the background when they're in their mom's basement, is what sells nowadays is authenticity.
Yeah.
I forget his name, but somebody's got a huge online social media following, was talking about really building his video presence, and he said he first went and set up the big expensive studio, and he had millions at his disposal, set up a big expensive studio, did all this stuff, And then he figured out the videos he was shooting on his couch, just talking to the
Yeah.
video were doing much better.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that I think gets missed in almost all marketing is, I know with the martial arts guys, they try to put a corporate facade
Mhm.
on a personal business.
Mhm.
And their emails come out in a corporate voice, their letters come out in a corporate voice. And first thing I always slap them around about is that should be coming from you
Right.
as the instructor. It shouldn't be coming from the school name. I mean,
Right.
nobody gets a warm and fuzzy when they get an email from AT&T, right?
Right.
But there's that personal, putting a human face on it.
Mhm.
And there's good corporate examples of that. Everything from Steve Jobs as the personal face of Apple to
Mhm.
Lee Iacocca when he turned around
Mhm.
Chrysler. Who was it? Victor Kiam, the old razor blade
Yeah, the razor. Right.
example. I mean, there's lots of current examples as well. Wendy's was never the same after Dave Thomas, was gone. And
Exactly.
and so putting that personal face on things and the personality and authenticity hits all the right buttons.
Yeah, I've heard you tell a story about your clients who were big Star Wars fans, are
Yeah.
big Star Wars fans,
Yeah.
and how you advise them to lean into that. That's exactly what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, that was the financial advisor example
Yeah.
there's a great book, and I've always thought about 80% of it is just silly and 20% of it is gold, but it's Tim Ferriss's book,
Mhm.
4 Hour Work Week.
Right.
And he uses this example of the old bald fat guy in the red BMW convertible as
Right.
his avatar of what he didn't want to be,
Right.
and that becomes the basis of the book. And with the financial advisors, I think the avatar for us is stolen from Ferris has been the guy in the J.C. Penney suit sitting at the oak desk, looking the same as everybody else. And
Mhm.
and I've now looked at thousands of websites and thousands of LinkedIn profiles, and you can't tell one from the other, right?
Yep.
And then they try to differentiate themselves with this alphabet soup of credentials that nobody but them knows what it means and cares, right? You
Yeah.
can be a
Yeah.
CFP, which is the biggest one, but you can be a CFHC, and
Mhm.
I'm butchering a couple of these, RICP, registered, well, whatever. But
Exactly.
last count, there's like 85 of these different designations, right?
Yeah.
And CFP is kind of like you're a CPA. But they're anywhere from I did a month course to I did a 6 month, whatever. But you'll see this string of stuff that their prospects don't know what it means,
Mhm.
don't care, and really have no interest in. And they think that's going to be their differentiator. Well,
Mhm.
though their differentiator is David Phelps. He's the guy for the dental industry to show them how not to have to be a practicing dentist anymore. Show them how to retire early. He calls the company Freedom Founders, freedom from
Mhm.
being a dentist. And he's a financial advisor. He's just in the real estate side of it. He's not. So he puts them into income producing properties. But you've got to figure out how to stand out for your niche and also stand out individually. So the Star Wars example was one of the first things I ask any of the financial advisors. I say, well, let's go through your client list. What's common among your clients? Well, what do you mean? Well, is there a certain group of people that you really click with, that you love working with, that they love working with you? If you were to narrow it down into the ones you make the most money from, that are least pain in your ass, who you enjoy the most, what would it be, right? And then and usually they never even thought about that, right? They may find that they have a heavy weighting of commercial real estate brokers, or a heavy weighting of investment bankers, or a heavy weighting of independent business owners, but they never even thought about that. They're just looking for anybody with $500,000 to invest.
Right.
But then the other thing is, what's interesting about you? What hobbies? What the first advisor I worked with, the way I got back into the niche, a good friend of mine now, his name is Peter. He's into Porsches, and so
Mhm.
he's had every model of the 911 Turbo. He's now in the process of collecting one of each generation of the 911 Turbo. And I keep saying to Peter, I can't get him to do it, by the way, but I keep saying to Peter, you should have the office with the glass wall, and you have the car collection on the other side, and you have the German theme and one thing or another everywhere. And then you should be doing the once a quarter seminar down at the Porsche dealership that you
Mhm.
dropped $2 million in. They should be marketing to their clientele to come here, the whatever lessons you're doing. you should be in the Porsche Club of America, the local newsletter, the statewide newsletter, the national. You should be a columnist in the national newsletter. We can go find list of everybody else who has a 911 Turbo, and you can send them a letter, with you and your collection, and the headline writes itself. How to secure your retirement, retire wealthy, and still have time to invest with and play with your toys. Something like that.
Yeah, beautiful. Right.
Can't get him to do it, but it's brilliant, right?
It is brilliant. Yeah, it is. It's brilliant. And I was thinking about my financial advisor, who I forget the first half of his title because it's the forgettable part.
Yeah.
But the second half of his title is Chief Joy Bringer.
There you go.
Albritton Financial, and his name's Neil Albritton, and he is all about getting down and dirty into the personal stuff of what brings him joy. I know all about him and his hobbies. He's a martial artist.
There you go.
Loves to get out in the country, drive his Jeep, loves his dogs. Now, I know all about him.
Yeah.
And he knows all about me and my kids and our farm and everything about us. And just that little detail, and there are many more details about this guy and how he runs his business. He has the greatest bar full of small batch bourbons and single malt scotch in the office. You always can get a dram if you want. The closet in his office has a sign that says "This way to Narnia."
I love it.
Little jokes, little personality. It's awesome. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Some people get that. Some people don't. And those who think that they have to go through life wearing this professional face, everything's serious, I'm going to deliver serious information, they're going to be left behind. They're already being left behind.
Yeah, especially in the age of AI, is the actual, and it's what I've told the martial arts guys forever, but it's even more true for the financial advisors, is it goes back to Gerber's E-Myth, where he talks about all business were started by a technician who one day had an entrepreneurial seizure. But most people think it's the technical component of what they do that's the value added.
Right.
And it really isn't what's the value add. In the martial arts side, they all try to advertise their X degree black belt, and they train with this person and this person, they won this and won this. All stuff that their audience has no interest in whatsoever. They don't care. They don't know what it means, any of that. But you've got to really step back and say, what's the conversation that they're going to have, and then what'll make you endearing. If you go on back to the insurance side, when I opened my first school, the guy next door, John McCain, I still remember, I haven't seen him in years, but he was a Arkansas Razorbacks fan. His business cards had the stupid suey pig thing on it, right?
Right.
He had and you can tell I'm not a Razorbacks fan. My family's from down there, but everywhere in his office, you had the Razorback, the suey pigs, the stupid little, finger thing, the thing he brought back from the last game he went to. And this is in Colorado. So it wasn't like he was catering to them in Fayetteville. But it was engaging, and you could be a fan of their arch rival, whoever that might be, and you would find him engaging and fun and interesting and find something about him that was interesting.
And what happens is you're watching TV on a Saturday afternoon and you see that Arkansas beat Missouri in the big football game, and you think to myself, that guy pops in your head. He's at home, he's happy, or he was at the game cheering. People are when you present with personality, when you entertain, when you share stories, when you give yourself, then people are more likely to know, like, trust, remember, and choose you.
Yeah, but the Star Wars story, we never got around to that. I was talking to an advisor, and I kept probing. I said, "What's interesting about you? What's unusual? What hobbies do you have?" And almost sheepishly, he finally says, "Well, this is kind of embarrassing." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, me and my wife are big Star Wars fans. So the other room over there is, pictures of us dressed up at Comic-Con, dressed up at Star Wars events. And by the way, I was the guy who went to the Star Trek conventions, right? The only time I ever liked Saturday Night Live was William Shatner's parody of the Star Trek conventions, by the way. Did you remember that one?
I do.
You guys, it's a TV show. Get a life. But when we started talking, I said, well, you're doing almost all your business on Zoom. You're living your life on Zoom. Why don't you make your office your Star Wars collection? And, I mean, sure, you can put your diploma back there and so forth, but put all the Star Wars stuff up, right? Like if you look at my backdrop, jewelry taught Muhammad Ali. The boxing glove is signed by Muhammad Ali. I've got a couple pictures of me and Chuck Norris back on the wall, some martial arts diplomas. I've actually got some academic credentials, but it's mostly just kind of eclectic crap. I'm a big Fleetwood Mac fan, so guitars signed by the members of Fleetwood Mac. But it's just all kind of interesting, eclectic. But I said, well, wear that on your sleeve, right? Let's create the website. And I was looking at an advisor. I didn't never work with him, but he was a big fly fishing fan. So his website had a picture of him fly fishing. He had a blog on fly fishing, one thing or another. Well, if you're a fly fisher, you found your guy, right? If that's the right word to use. And with the Star Wars guy, I said, look, everybody loves Star Wars, right? You're not gonna get anybody who thinks, oh my God, that's the enemy. But you're gonna get people who think it's cute and are engaging. But I got to tell you what, there's at least 20 million Star Wars fans that would probably be good clients for you. So you're gonna engage and click with them more than anybody else would.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes back to that word that you shared before, authentic.
You bet.
Even if you don't like Star Wars, you said it. No one's going to say, "Oh, this person likes Star Wars." Yeah, no way, I'm not doing business with him. It just makes you more human. You mentioned AI a moment ago. In this age of robots, you have to figure out a way to stand out as human.
You bet. Yeah, I'll give you another example. I use that example. There's another marketing guru for financial advisors, James Pollard, and I don't know him very well. I've met him. He's got some similar background to what we have. I listened to his podcast and one thing or another, but I invited him onto my podcast, financial advisor marketing podcast, and we were talking, and somehow I told the story of my son's a big Star Wars fan, and maybe Comic-Con or something. I forget how it came up. And I've always been a Star Trek fan, and we have the battles about one thing or another. And then a couple of days after we get done with the podcast, I get a bobblehead. What do they call it? The little square box pops or whatever they're called. It'll come to me, but the little figurines that you can't get away from. But one of them was Kirk, and one of them was Darth Vader. Yeah. And the note said, I so much enjoyed our time on the podcast. Thank you so much. I heard you say you're a Star Wars fan, so I thought you might enjoy this. And by the way, you said your son's a Star Trek fan, so I sent that. Yeah. Well, yeah, I looked it up. They're $8 or $10 each on Amazon. It took him 3 or 4 clicks. But what the important thing was is when I made a reference, he made a note. Yeah. And he remembered it. Yeah. And then the follow-up was hyper personal, right? Yeah. Now, I could have gotten an email from him that said, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'd love to come back someday. Yeah, that would have been nice. Yeah. Right. But the personal gift about something that I mentioned, to even recognize they were paying attention. And this was cute. And by the way, I've got both of them. I should have had it on my desk here. Both of them sitting out with his note taped on it as an example I've used 10 times, giving him full credit for it. Even though, sort of we're in competition, but I mean, it's a big sea out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Just so many awesome stories you've shared, Stephen, and so many valuable lessons inside. This is one of those episodes to go back, listen to, watch again, and just take notes. I feel like we could do this for another couple of hours. But
we've got to get our time limit, haven't we?
Yeah. I have things to do, but I have a feeling down the road we'll get you back on the show. We'll do this again, and we'll just go down some other roads and figure out what other experience and knowledge and martial arts lessons to share with the audience. But in the meantime, we do have to call it a day. I want you to share with our audience where they can find you so they can dig deeper into what Stephen Oliver is all about. And before you say that, I want to emphasize, don't tune out. Don't decide, oh, I don't need to go check this guy out just because you don't run a martial arts school or just because you're not a financial planner. The stuff that Stephen is doing is valuable and instructive to anybody who's running a business. Now, I'm not sure that you want all sorts of people calling you up and saying, "Give me advice," but nonetheless, pay attention, check out Stephen's stuff, whether you were running a martial arts school or a financial planner. Stephen, where can they find you?
Well, I've got, as you might imagine, all kinds of free gifts, a newsletter, and so forth. Advisor Wealth Mastery is one site for the financial advisors, but I'll gift them two or three of my books there, one thing or another, and they're completely applicable to any niche. And then Martial Arts Wealth, uh, um, martialartswealth.com is the site for the financial advisors. You can find me anywhere online, Stephen Oliver. I'm not the painter or the actor or the artist, but the martial artist and the financial advisor guy. So
Yep.
I'm out there everywhere else.
Well, all these links where you can find Stephen are going to be in the show notes. Stephen Oliver, really enjoyed being with you today. And if you enjoyed the episode, please go check out Story Power Marketing Show on Apple. Give us a 5-star review, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Also, go to storypowermarketing.com for free resources, downloads, sign up for the email list to see how I do it, like Matt Fury and all those others that we talked about. And we'll see you down the road. Thanks again, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was fun. It flies, doesn't it?
It flies. Thanks. Awesome. That was
Hopefully
great.
that was on target. And
yeah, absolutely. And we did go long, but I could have predicted it. That
yeah,
once we get going on this stuff. But yeah, I love Matt Fury. I have a great Matt Fury. I bought like a 15 or 20-year-old Matt Fury seminar, and I weave this story into my own trainings where Fury, so it was 10, 12 people paid 10, 15 grand to be in a hotel with him for a weekend. And on the second day, they go out to lunch and they go to a Thai restaurant. And then they come to the hotel room, the conference room, and Matt says, "Okay, you all know, we spent a day and a half talking about story powered emails and how to do this thing. We all just went to lunch at the Thai restaurant. Everybody seemed to have a good time. Write an email about lunch that sells your stuff." And it was pretty remarkable how good. Now, I would say out of 12 emails, this is a lot. It's a good 15, 20-hour long tape.
yeah,
And it's pretty remarkable how good 8 of the emails were.
yeah,
He's a good teacher. Ben Zettel credits Matt Fury for being the guy, the one who really started the daily email thing.
Yeah, it was. I was part of Kennedy's different mastermind groups back when it was, Matt Fury and Joe Polish and Bill Glazier and a bunch of the old the current internet marketing guys. Well, Corey Rudel passed away, but
Right.
Frank Kern was part of that group, and you can kind of go on and on and on. But back in the day, all the different ones who made it big were all part of that original nucleus.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey,
well, go ahead.
I was going to say, send me the recording. I'll put it out on all of our channels as well.
Okay. Yeah. We actually had burned through. I had taken a few weeks off, so we'd burned through our backlog of episodes. So we're actually going to launch, if not this week, next week. I'll get you the recording. We'll share it, and I'll see you at Mastermind. And I forget, did I put you on my email list? Do you want to be on my list?
Yeah, put me on your list. I don't know if I am or not, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Yeah, I heard you say to Delon that you hate email, but I understood. I didn't.
I do. All right, I have an autoresponder, which again I stole from Tim Ferriss. That basically have an autoresponder with me pulling my hair out, says I hate email.
Yeah.
And then it says, if you need this, go here. If you need this, go here. If you need this, go here.
Yeah. There's a great one quick Tim Ferriss story. I heard him interviewed not long after the book came out, and somebody asked him the title, and it was really, really clear that whoever was interviewing him just sort of didn't get it.
Yeah.
And was super earnest in that,
Mm-hmm.
4-hour work week. Where do you come up with the title?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, my first idea was to call it the 3-hour work week, but my publisher didn't think that would be realistic.
Yeah, you've heard the story about how he came up with the title, right?
Yeah, the 5.
Yeah.
He did paid search. He also put fake books in the bookstore.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that story.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Stephen, thanks. See ya.
Thank you.